Hello, my creative friends, and welcome to another episode of the Daily Prompt. If you're new here, you haven't been watching these videos before, this is probably not the place to start because over the past 7 episodes, we've been reverse engineering the process, starting at the end, and then each of the 7 videos, we go into each of the 7 phases of the process, starting at the end and sort of working our way backward to the beginning. Now, what we're going to do today is we're going to look at, now that we have this whole picture, what does that mean sort of moving forward through the process? And I'm going to show you how the process itself enables you to more or less guarantee your success, your results. So if you haven't watched those other ones, please stop here, go check out those starting at episode 15. If you can watch the whole series before you get here, even better. But what if you don't understand the full context, just these details out of context are not going to quite fall into place. So if you can, please do that. Now, so for everyone who has been watching along, now that we understand the 7 phases of the process and how we sort of work our way backwards, ultimately it's a matter of figuring out what your end goal is and working backwards to how do I get to that end goal. So now that we have done that, we see the whole picture, let's look at it from a forward view. Right? Let's look at it from moving forward through the process. So you have an idea for a movie. Before you jump into that, you pre-align with your target. You understand what your target's interested in, what your target needs. You put those ideas into your creative subconscious, and then you start finding your ideas. You start developing your ideas. You start shaping them into a story. You use, story structure. You can use any of the books and the gurus and all that. All that stuff happens in the story development phase. My approach is to grow a story organically. So you start with your purpose, your motivation, your theme, whatever it might be that's driving the story forward. You grow your story organically out of that. You create the story plan. You blast it out. You get it onto the page. Then you go through it and you refine it to make sure that whatever poured out onto the page, which is not going to be quite the story that you want to tell, whatever that is, you refine that into literally the story that you want to tell. You reshape and you go through those 6 levels to ultimately turn it into a story that's going to land with the reader. You then refine that, you polish it, you turn it into a page turner so that when they pick it up, they have an I was getting better, and then the weather got cold. You turning that into a page turner experience, so that when the reader picks it up, they cannot put it down. They're pulled through it. They're into your story. Whether they ultimately like your story, whether they ultimately connect with your story, they're going to be able to give you solid notes. They're going to be able to give you detailed feedback. You're going to be able to take and interpret that, figure out how your project is landing, and then refine your project so that it lands with whatever reader the way that you want it to land with that reader. And then it's a matter of finding and connecting with that project's ideal producer. Now, there's another layer to reverse engineering the process, which ultimately makes success inevitable. At a certain point, you cannot not succeed if you do what I'm about to tell you. Now, if you actually understand and you master the process-based approach to creating stories, to writing, what happens is you start here, you pre-align, you go through this process, you design, you get feedback, you adapt, you align, you try to connect. If you can't connect, well, then what do you do at that point? Then you use that to pre-align for the next project, or to further refine this project, or to rethink this project. The secret to ultimate success is to loop. I've long said that there is no such thing as a bad screenplay. There are only early drafts. So if you write or read a horrible screenplay, right? It's like, what is this? This is a mess. If you see that, that doesn't mean that this is forever. It's not set in stone. It hasn't been chiseled into the side of a rock and put on a mountain somewhere, right? This is a screenplay. All you have to do is take that, go through the rewrite process, loop back through the rewrite process, and further refine it. You get to another draft. It's still not solid. What do? You loop back through the process. Now, the beauty of understanding the 7-phase process itself is that at any point along the way, you can simply determine I'm not getting whatever result I'm wanting at this point in the process, simply loop back through that part of the process. If that's still not generating results, loop further back into the process. Think about it this way. if you have an idea for a story, I don't know, some love story that's set on those hot air balloons, right? I have this great idea. That's going to be floating. Love is about floating through the sky, or whatever your idea is. The stuff that comes up spontaneously. Anyway, imagine that's what you want your story to be, because you want to talk about the frivolity of love, or whatever your thematic idea is that you're trying to, and you go through this whole process and you refine your story, and it ends up, you get notes and feedback and refine. Now the notes and feedback may ultimately send you back to rewrite your project. But at a certain point, you may go, I think the whole idea of love on a balloon is not really working. What I'm trying to say is, whatever the other idea is, simply loop back further into the process, right? So you loop back to the beginning of the story development phase. You loop back to the beginning of the apply phase, the strengthen phase, the tweak phase, all the way back to the setup phase, where you pre-align your imagination with whatever your target is. Say you write a horror film, because horror is always going to sell. You have a horror film producer that you know is looking for material, but they're looking for original material. Maybe you sort of rushed it a little bit and you blasted out a project, and it's just not that scary, and it just doesn't actually hit the mark. There's no sort of viable audience for it. And so when you try to connect with, horror film script competitions, or people give you feedback, and you start to realize, hey, I haven't actually gone far enough into the horror world, you can simply go back to the setup phase, and you can start to really do more research on what the industry is about, what kinds of stories have been told. Do that deeper digging in order to actually find the material, in order to actually put those ideas into your head to redevelop a new project. As a screenwriter, as a storyteller, you cannot fail. All you can ever do is quit, because nothing is final, nothing is set in stone. All writing is rewriting. You've probably heard this before. That's a saving grace for you as a writer, because at the end of the day, if you create something that will not connect, you create something that doesn't open the doors, you create something that no producer wants to look at, you create something that everyone says this is not working, this is confusing to read, or this is, I didn't like the characters, or any of that kind of feedback, all you have to do is simply loop back through the process. And this is why I'm a huge fan, I'm a big believer, that what I've sort of discovered and figured out about the storytelling thing, and what I do that's completely different to everybody else, is the process-based approach. It's really about mastering the process. Because if you can master this process, ultimately, you cannot fail. Ultimately, success is inevitable, because as you go through that process and you hit roadblocks, and you will hit roadblocks, you will write material that's terrible. You will write material that people can't understand or decipher or read, or when they do read it, they get angry with you because it doesn't take them where they want to go. It's a learning process. Like, it's forever learning and forever evolving. So, as you think about the process itself, let's bring it back to the process, and we think about reverse engineering the process. First thing we do is we pre-align our imagination so that the ideas that we come up with are in sync with our target, or as much so as we can get to at this point. If you don't know much about any of this stuff, it's going to take longer to do that as you learn, as you develop, as you put that stuff in your creative subconscious. With that, we start finding our stories. We figure out what are the best ideas for us, the ideas that are going to express what we're trying to say. We grow that organically into a story, characters, choices, subplots, themes, metaphors, story world, all the detail of your story. Put that into your story plan. Give yourself a roadmap that you then use to blast out that draft. You get the script actually written, so it's no longer just an idea or an array of ideas bouncing around in your head. It's a script that you can actually look at and judge and start to decipher, how far away am I from what I'm setting out to achieve. Then you take that through the rewrite process. How far away you are depends upon the script itself. So you make it more and more solid. You loop through that rewrite process. You refine that process. At any point along the way, think about the roadblocks that you're going to hit. For pre-aligning your imagination, you may hit some, you probably won't know the roadblocks at the very beginning, because you probably only know them as you get towards the end and realize, oh geez, I didn't pre-align with my target well enough, so it didn't land effectively enough at the end. With story development, you start putting your story together and it's just not coming together. What do? You keep looping. You keep looping back through that process. The ultimate goal of the writing process, as I see it, is to make each one of those 7 phases intuitive. To make each one of those 7 phases almost effortless and fluid. If you imagine a master of any art, right? Let's say screenwriting, but we can also talk about like painting, right? If you imagine a master painter, they don't have to think about the dimensions or the aspect ratio or the balance of the frame or the color palettes or how to mix the colors or how to put shapes and what shapes are going to convey what kind of message to an. They know that stuff through experience, through practice, because they've been through the process again and again and again. Same thing with writing. And an experienced writer, someone who's been through the process many times, they understand the basics of story structure. They understand the basics of character design. They understand the basics of scenes. They understand the basics of dialogue or whatever it might be. And so creating that stuff is more easy, more fluid than for someone who is new to it. So as you get better at it, you become more intuitive with it. You're able to fly through each of those phases. Now, ultimately what happens is as you master the process itself, you're able to fly through the process itself as sort of a fluid motion for each of them, right? So if you're a new writer, the first time you go through the process of developing your story, it's really about figuring out the dynamics. And you may end up writing a script that's just not very solid because you don't quite understand the dynamics yet. But if once you discover, oh, my structure isn't quite right, my pacing's off, whatever it might be, then you can simply loop back through that process again and you get better and better at it. At a certain point, it becomes natural. It becomes second nature. Once you start writing stuff that connects and lands with the reader, with the audience, then then all of that is going to help you on your next project. So it becomes fluid. The entire process, ultimately, is a big, giant loop, right? The entire process is as you go through. Here's the challenge that writers don't really understand. The first time you're going through all this stuff, you're learning new things. You don't understand all the detail of it all. You haven't filled in all the gaps. You don't understand all the nuances and how everything connects with everything else. So the first time you go through it, it's not going to be perfect. It's probably not going to lead to the sale. But as you go through it and you start to understand all those dynamics, well, then guess what? The next time you go through it, you're using all of the skills and the nuances that you've learned along the way. So in many ways, the reality of the process itself is that the loop is where the power comes from. So if you're just starting out and you have that idea in your head and it's burning a hole in your brain and you're sitting there and you want to like blast it out so that you can go sell it 3 months from now because you read some book that said, hey, here's how to sell a book and sell a screenplay in 3 months. Yeah, right. If that's what you're thinking, the problem is that you don't know what you don't know. The problem is that you don't know all the nuances and how they're all connected. If you go into it understanding that it is a loop, and then each time you loop, then you're taking all the knowledge and the skills, snapping it together, and then applying it. What happens is, if you're process driven, what happens is then every single project you write, assuming that you're attempting to improve with each project, every single project you write informs the next project that you write. You get better and better and better. Excuse me. When you face obstacles along the way, when you face challenges, nobody will read your script. Nobody will consider your project for production. No script writing competition selects you as the winner, or even gives you a finalist position, right? When you come across those obstacles, those rejections, they're not rejections. As you come up to those problems, as you come up to those obstacles and those challenges, if you consider the process as a loop, as a 7-phase process, if you consider the structure of the act of creativity, the act of writing, if you consider that, then when you face those obstacles, it merely becomes something to figure out. How do I get around this obstacle? Nobody will read my scripts. How do I get around that obstacle? How do I get someone to read my scripts? Well, I may need to lift the quality of my writing. I may need to refine and polish. I may need to tweak more. I may need the core story idea to be stronger. But because you're going through this as a process, what happens is ultimately each time you hit those obstacles, you are prepared to use that data, use those insights to reinforce your creative process the next time through. Does it make sense? Let me know if it makes sense. It makes sense to me, but I've been doing this for 20 years. So if it doesn't make sense, ask me in the comments, drop a question, let me know how this is all landing with you, because I want to adapt and refine and revise and loop back to help you get where you're trying to go based upon how this stuff is landing. So if you have any questions about any of the stuff, let me know. The takeaway from today, from an overview, is the way to guarantee your results is to simply not quit. Is to, as you go through every step of this, understand where you are in the process. Understand where you are in a process-driven approach to your goal. If you understand where you are in the process, and you understand that the process loops, that with each new project, you're going through the process again with all the knowledge and skills and insights from the previous attempt, then whatever obstacles or challenges you face at any point along the way simply become data points to learn about, to understand, to improve upon. Anytime you face a negativity in your forward progress, focus in on what that is. Focus on what that challenge was. Focus in on the problem that you faced, because that's where you need to focus your attention on your improvement. If you do that and then slot that knowledge into the process again, ultimately you go through that process next time with greater improvement. On the second script, the third script, the 10th script, the 15th, the 100th script, you will get where you're trying to go, because those little problems become the things you focus on improving. And as you focus on improving them, you open up the possibilities. You make it more or less guaranteed for your results. Now, if you're a lot of people who are not native English speakers, or maybe you're not good with writing and you haven't sort of learned that stuff, or the way you tell your stories is like people are reading it, not understanding, well, then that's your challenge. That's the thing you're going to need to improve upon, right? If the stories that you write are all budget misaligned with whoever you're trying to connect with, that's what you're going to need to focus on, right? And you take that and you apply that on the next loop through the process. That's how to guarantee your results. And, you may say, well, that's not really a guarantee, but that is a guarantee. That's how it works. If you really treat this as an ongoing, possibly lifelong learning process, if you really have that passion, you really have that vision, that thing that you're reaching for, and you understand that I'm not going to quit until I get that thing, all it becomes about is looping through the process until you get your results. In that way, there is no way to fail. The only way to fail is to quit at some point along the way because it's too hard, or I'm not getting the results that I want, or whatever it might be. Whatever your excuse is for quitting. And I have heard them all. I have heard every possible excuse you can imagine. So at the end of the day, just don't quit. At the end of the day, continue moving forward, identify your problem areas, your challenge areas, and keep looping through that process. That's how to guarantee your success. So let's turn this into a daily prompt for us today. The daily prompt today is simple. Now that you understand the whole process, or from overview, obviously we haven't gotten into all the weeds and all the detail and whatever, but hopefully you understand the process itself. My question to you is, where are you within the process? And are you prepared to loop through that process on this and subsequent projects. Take that idea, take that concept on board. Let the idea of it being a looping process expand your mind and your perspective. I promise you, it will change the way you think about your writing. It will change the way you think about the project you're working on right now. It will change the way you think about the industry itself. It will change the way you think about what I'm trying to build. It will change the way you think. It opens up unlimited possibility for you. But you have to dig into it. You have to see where you are objectively as you can. Where are you today? Where do you think you're going to need to go? And how do you think that loop happens? If you can identify those things, let that spark and inspire your imagination today. And remember to take action. We talk about it every single day. That's what this show is for. All the information is just information. The most important part of every one of these episodes is this right here at the end. When you're done, stop. Stop watching. Don't watch the next video. Don't watch the next my video. Stop watching. Just go silent. Turn YouTube off. Go silent. Ponder this stuff. Filter it through your own unique perspective and imagination. What do you agree with? What do you disagree with? Filter it through your vantage point. Be quiet and then take action. 10 minutes, 1 hour, 10 hours, whatever you can afford. If it's only 10 minutes, take 10 minutes. Take action today, okay? That's how you're going to get where you're trying to go. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.